2/8 1 plus 1 à 600 mètres.
Last week on our Step Up segment, we talked about what muscles are used during your step up and how to optimize your step up with the best form possible. This week, we're talking about progressive overload. Cam's going to go into more detail about that and discuss that with you to optimize your step up and make it the best step up for you.
Hi guys, let's talk a little bit about progressive overload. What is progressive overload? I like to think of it like the hero's journey. The hero's journey is the thing that we always see in movies. So the first act is called the departure, where we start with somebody getting introduced, we understand their story, and they typically go on some sort of a journey. The second act is called the initiation. That's where they're taken into a situation that challenges them in some way, and they have to learn something, do something, what have you, to win. The third act is the return. And the return is where they come back and they've learned something and they're stronger or better for it. Now, progressive overload is like the hero's journey for your muscles. We want to put the muscles under some sort of a strain so that they have to learn to be stronger. In this case, it's actually the muscle tearing and repairing so that it becomes stronger on the other side of that challenge. We add more and more challenge to the muscle to make the muscles grow or become stronger or be able to endure more. 4 ways that we can do this are through weight, reps, time under load, or power. A lot of people will talk about volume versus load. The general thought is that more load and low volume create more muscle, and more volume and less load create more endurance. But that's really a rabbit hole that I'm not willing to fall into just right now because you don't have time, and it's a really good subject for another video, frankly. So how do you choose a step-up variation? Well, let's talk about that. First of all, what's your goal? Are you an athlete that's looking to develop power? Well, let's talk about adding load, so weights, or power, the plyometrics. Are you someone that sits a lot for your job, or for gaming, or on a commute, or because you're depressed and everybody just likes to sit right now? Well, at that point, we might want to look at endurance variations or multiplanar variations. If you're somebody that likes to hike, you might benefit from range of motion work because, of course, as you start to go up a mountain, you need to be able to articulate and develop power through those hips at different angles. If you're dealing with an injury or for some reason you're out of condition, you might want to consider adjusting tempo or range. So a lower step up might become more appropriate, but in order to challenge yourself, you can slow the step up down. And we'll look at that in the next section.
All right, so we're going to be talking about some quick fixes that you can make to your step ups. You may be finding that some things are not working, so here are a few tips and tricks to get you through those errors. So D, we're going to demonstrate hip drop for everybody. So hip drop is when you're not using your glute med properly. See how D is dipping her hip to hit the floor. So D, I'm going to get you to contract your hip and think of creating lateral tension from that hip. Also thinking of corkscrewing your foot into the ground. This is a good cue to get that glute med to fire. Thinking of pushing that knee out, keeping those hips level, D can drop properly. Nice and level. Now we're going to show you what hip rotation looks like. We always want our hips to stay level with each other and not stacking on top of each other. This is a common error that you'll see in step downs and step ups. So D, show us what hip rotation looks like. It looks very pretty like a ballerina, but it's not what we want. So D, pull that hip forward and think of your hips facing the floor as you step down. You can even put your hands on your hips to help you with that. Good. We're going to talk about knee valgus. This means that D's knees are falling in. What this actually means is that her arch is not contracting. So Dee, I'm gonna get you to contract your foot and get that active arch that we talked about in mechanics last week. Good, try that again. And you can see that her knee is tracking better. We weren't joking when we said quick fixes, guys. Now we're gonna show you what it looks like when Dee is lacking hinging mechanics. So this is gonna put a lot of pressure to her knee. So Dee, can you show us what that would look like without hinging during your step down? Although this can technically strengthen your knees and has its place, this isn't a proper step down and is not gonna optimize your range of motion. So Dee, I'm gonna get you to hinge for me instead. So allowing your hips to move backwards while keeping neutral pelvis, she's actually going to push into that hip and use her glute more instead of her quad. This is a quick fix if you wanna get more glute activation during your step down or step up. So here's another common error that we often see in coaching, and that's that people try to lift up their heel during a step down. They think that this centers their body a little bit more and makes them feel safer, when in reality, it just puts your knee at risk and does not make you safer. We want to get good glute activation, we want to get good hamstring activation, and not just use our quads during step downs. So Dee, I'm going to get you to put that heel back down and really sit into that hip and use that control that you have. Nice.
I don't have control.
It's so much better.
So we can also adjust our range of motion in our step up by going to a lower step up. So if you find you don't have much control through your range of motion, shorten it, do less range of motion, and own that range first. So here Jess can really focus on all those little points, her strong foot, her knee, her hips, and then control. And then as she builds up, she can go to a higher and higher step as she improves. So we're going to start with a variation that will help us adjust our range of motion. So to make this step up harder, we can take ourselves through more range of motion. One way we can do this is actually just by bending our bottom leg. So if Jess starts at the top with her step, she'll hit the floor at the same spot every time. But if she starts to bend her knee without changing or dropping her hip position, it's actually going to work her through more range of motion on that top leg. This is also a great way to work on a new range of motion when you don't quite have full control, because this will let you get a little bit of support from that bottom position and a little help pushing off until eventually you won't need any help. Here we can adjust our step-ups by changing the pace at which we do them. This is working with tempo to challenge or regress a movement. So Jess is going to slow down her step up on the way up and down. So this means she has to have full control at every point in her movement. And especially when we slow the movement down on the down phase, it actually causes a little bit more tension on the muscle and helps us build strength through that full range of motion. We can take this challenge even further, which we touched on a little bit last week, by pausing. So especially if you're trying to build more range, you could pause really close to the bottom, have to build that stability right in that challenging spot, and then keep going through it. We can also create a challenge by taking the tempo the other direction. We can think about speeding it up on the way up to have to create more power and more explosive drive. This is really great if you play any sports with running. If you want to add the extra, you can do a really strong knee drive at the top. That's going to cause the abs to have to fire on a little bit more to keep your pelvis stable. And then the next level of this, going all the way up, is actually adding a jump on that top foot. So you have to transfer your power to that top foot and then control your landing with a soft foot. So that's where that active foot is really important. So you land toe, heel, and then absorb that impact with the muscles that surround the knees and the hips. Ooh, Jess is feeling her heart rate coming up now. We can also adjust the intensity of our step-ups without changing the movement at all, but by changing the volume of step-ups that we do. So this means that in one set, we could go from, say, 8 reps to 10 reps to 15 reps, all in a set without taking any rest. This means that you're spending more time challenging those muscles, building more endurance, and challenging the muscles in a way you weren't challenging them in before. Then week to week, you could even look at increasing a rep every set, or if you're adding more sets, that will also adjust the volume. Another way you can challenge this is by keeping the same amount of reps, but by decreasing your rest time in between them. So maybe you're doing 3 sets of 8 reps, but instead of having 60 seconds rest in between, you're cutting that down to 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 15 seconds, and with less rest, that means you're going to be a lot more tired when you go into your next set. One way we can challenge our step-ups is by changing the plane of motion our hips work in. So you can see Jess is actually working off of a crossed over foot, so she's getting a bit more rotation on her hip. This is a really great way to strengthen the muscles that stabilize the pelvis, which include the deep core, the pelvic floor. It's also a really great way to build more range of motion and more mobility in the hips so that you can maybe own some other challenging leg and hip exercises. So we always want our hips to point to that front knee so that the toes, the knee, and the hips are all working together, pointing in the same direction. Looking pretty solid and stable here, Jess. We can also change the way our center of mass is balanced out across our body by adjusting the position of the hanging foot, which is the non-working foot. But by adjusting the position, we start getting that leg working a little bit more. So Jess is going to hang her foot a little bit more in front of her, which is going to shift her weight. So her foot on her planted leg is going to work a little bit harder to adjust to that change. And then she's also working that hip flexor on the bottom leg to try and hold it up. This is a great variation if you're working towards some more calisthenic type step-ups. So we can adjust our intensity on our step-ups by changing our center of mass through the movement. We can do this by moving our hanging foot or resting foot around like a lovely little pendulum here, like Jess is doing. Looks like a little clock. So by swinging her foot more forward, she's going to be using a bit more hip flexor on that resting leg, so it's not resting anymore, but it's also going to shift her weight differently. So she's going to have to sit back to counterbalance a bit, and her working foot is going to work a little bit harder to be able to adjust to that change in weight. So she can also swing that leg behind her now, which is going to change where she's loaded in her foot. So it's just going to add a little bit more tension into the glute, and again, put some more work into that bottom foot to adjust to that leg position. And in that hanging foot, she's using a bit more of her glute on that side instead of when she had it forward and was using a bit more hip flexor.
Hey guys, so right before this part plays, I want you to know that Jess and I did not know that Dee doesn't know what a plant is.
One of the more obvious ways we can challenge our step up is obviously by adding more weight to it. We've been showing you variations of body weight step ups, but now we want to show you how to add some load. So Jess is going to find us a weight or a plant, which I guess can be a weight. See, you guys, you don't need dumbbells, you don't need barbells, you don't need all that equipment. You just need the plants that you put your tender, loving care into. Beautiful. What a gorgeous plant. So now Jess is holding this weight, and for one, she's not going to be able to use her arms anymore to float around to find her balance. So now she has to create some tension on that weight and also push more weight up on that single leg through her step up. So this is a great way to challenge your step up. You can find any other household items just like Jess has done here and see how you can push yourself in your step up and grow your garden all at the same time. Oh.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with us, watching that video. We are so excited that you're here with us on Patreon. So if you have anything that you want to suggest to us, if you have any concerns, good ideas that we can use, please don't hesitate to get a hold of us here. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to continue to endeavor to bring you guys everything first and bring you guys more content because we want you to know how much we appreciate your support. From Jess, Diana, and myself, we love you, and we'll see you next time.